it useful if I just sort of talk through the process on that film? Is that
Yeah.
Carney and Saul came to the story by accident. There was a collection of short stories about birthdays, and they just happened to read this particular story. And it had basically no narrative at all, but there was something in it that appealed to their image-making sides. And the BBC funded it, and they really kind of struggled with the whole thing of writing a script, because they'd never written a script before. They didn't know really what a script was, even down to how you structure it, or how you write it, or what typeface you use, or anything. Because in commercials, they just basically always produce a mood board and then a storyboard. And as you can tell from that, every single shot is incredibly carefully constructed. So before they had a script, they had a storyboard. The first thing I saw was a storyboard. Beautifully, beautifully drawn. Saul, who is the animator, who did all that animation himself, is also a very, very fine artist. And for me, it was a completely eye-opening experience, partly because I know nothing at all about animation and that world, but also partly I've always started from story, from narrative. And suddenly we found that we didn't even have the same language as each other. When Saul and I tried to sit down and do a schedule, he could only think in terms of shots, and I could only think in terms of scenes. And the script, which was basically a kind of line description of each shot, was not what I think of as a script at all. And so we really kind of struggled with finding the same language as each other. And to the end, I don't think we really did, but it was about finding, I suppose, I just had to sort of trust in them. They, to a certain extent, had to trust in me, and we kind of did muddle through in terms of the shoot, because scheduling was quite difficult. A lot of money went on shooting on 35mm. That was a really expensive choice, but they were absolutely adamant that it had to just have that wonderful kind of rich look. And I don't know. I think it was money well spent myself. I don't know whether it was an absolute nightmare to do for me. Again, for the first time I'd worked on 35mm, and I hadn't really understood about the materiality of film. You send these things off. In fact, my daughter was the runner on the shoot, so she was driving up to London every night at about 8 o'clock, dropping it off at the lab, going to stay overnight, waiting until the lab had developed, sent it over to the Telecine place the next day. It was transferred into digital, made DVDs, and then she'd drive back and she'd pick up the DVD and she'd come back to the set, and she'd eventually arrive back at the set about midday the next day, and everybody wanted to see the rushes. And as you're sitting there at about sort of 9 in the morning, you get a phone call from the lab saying this has happened or that has happened, or and of course you're on tenterhooks, because a scratch or something on the neg or some kind of accident in the bath, and your whole day has gone. And when you've got a 5-day shoot, that's quite stressful. That's a fifth of your film down the pan. And there was one day when there was a scratch on every single shot, which was, I don't know how it came about, and of course everybody blamed everybody else. The cameraman said it happened in the lab, and the lab said it happened in the camera, and so on and so forth. So there's something about film which is quite a kind of high stress medium. So that was again, that was new to me. The post-production, you can see that there are two producers. There's myself and Kat Armour-Brown. Kat had worked with Carney and Saul before on commercials, and she was the one that asked me to come on board and produce sort of the Bristol end. Once we got into post-production, we kind of shared the job, and she took over more of the post-production stuff because she works in commercials. She had more of the connections, she could do the deals and so on and so forth. And most of the time was spent on the animation. The stop frame we shot during the shoot. We shot that on site. We got a second camera in from Panasonic. No, I beg your pardon, from Panavision. And we had a little attic upstairs in the location where we were, and we set up the stop frame guy up there, and he did the dog there. That was a day. the dog, which I absolutely love that dog. I think it's great. The other place that money went, you can always, it's really interesting looking at a budget of a film, I think. You can really tell a lot about what the film is going to be by where you put your money. And a lot of money went to design, a lot of money went into 35mm, a lot of money went into things like the stop frame and the costumes. And it was all about texture and image and all that. We shot for 5 days. Pretty much got it done in one location. The location was a beautiful house owned actually by some friends of mine. They are still friends of mine. But I have to say there were a few moments when I was sort of concerned on that front. An amazing house, an absolutely beautiful house, not completely sort of obvious from that, but it was an amazing house. The designer was a London designer. He had done a lot of commercials, and he absolutely had a kind of eye. He just understood Carney and Saul instantly. He knew what they wanted, and he had a kind of knack for just picking all the right things. So that the sofa, I don't know whether you could see it, but the sofa had a kind of a scene on the back of it, and all the pictures around the place, every single thing was either with some kind of insect theme or bird theme. Everything was very, very precisely chosen, the teapot. And it all came from a London's props house and was shipped down. It's quite an expensive thing. So that's really where the money went. The money went into the visuals. So for me, it was a great experience. I think a lot of people watch it and they say, yeah, but what is it about? What on earth is it about? And it's true, it's quite hard to sort of think, well, what is that? But in a way, that the texture of it, I think, and the sheer sort of beauty of it, it kind of, I hope, pulls it off. Before I move on, does anybody else want to chip in or say anything or ask anything or about that film? Yeah.
I wanted to ask about who kind of commissioned it and who was behind it. So it was BBC Film Network, did you say?
BBC Film Network paid £10,000. They commission 4 or 5 films every year, and you are at liberty, I don't think you have to, but you are at liberty to go and get match funding. So Carney and Saul's commercials representation, Stink, which are a massive, very, very wealthy commercials outfit in London, they chipped in another 10. Southwest Screen put in 2. Carney and Saul's agency in Paris put in 2. And we got an awful lot of deals, from post-production and, I tell you the other thing that cost a lot of money was music rights. Now that was a very interesting process because Carney and Saul, we got this sort of music agency to say they would do all the music for free or for like really, really super cheap. So Carney and Saul, we went to this meeting and they really wanted this kind of tribal, from what you heard, they really wanted that. And they had found these bits of music on various DVDs. On various CDs. We went along, we had a meeting, and they played all this stuff, and they said, we see this music here, we see this music there, and we see that music there. And so that was the brief. And this company went away, and they sort of basically produced a kind of cheap version of what they'd heard, a sort of fake version of what they'd heard, because Carney and Saul heard it and they just thought, well, no, it has no texture, it has no life, it's not real. And so we chucked it all out and we went back to the original artists and we paid for rights on all the original pieces of music. The piece at the end was by an artist called Misha Henson, who they had worked with on a promo, on a music promo they'd done. And he said, yeah, you can have the rights for free, no problem. And we thought, great. Let's just sew up the contracts with Sony. No, you're shaking your head. No, it wasn't for free. No. You get, the artist could say you can have it for free, but of course they don't own the bloody thing. You get talking to Sony and it's not for free at all. So that cost a lot of money. That's where a lot of stuff, a lot of cash went. More than we had hoped or expected, for sure.
Alison, could
Yes.
you put a quantity on the sweat equity and the deals
on there,
that was in there? No, what was the true budget? Had you had to pay
Oh God,
everybody
if you'd had to pay
full rate and all the facilities full
I've
rate?
never done the figures because it would be too scary.
Exactly. Well, how scared ought you to be?
At least 60, if
I
not
was gonna say,
70.
yeah.
Because everybody on the set everybody across the board was paid 300 quid for the week. Which clearly, including the designer, the DOP, costume designer, everybody, makeup, everybody got paid 300 quid. I haven't been paid anything, not a penny. And I've worked on this film kind of on and off for over a year. No, actually nearly 18 months. I came on board last July. So aside from production, post-production, I've submitted to all the festivals, the promotion, it hasn't gone away. I'm still doing stuff on it.
It's a lifestyle choice, not a business.
Well, it's not a business choice,
No,
that's for sure. I mean, I'm in a very lucky position that I can kind of afford to do it, but it's not a business proposition.
Yeah, obviously there's quite a lot of CGI and animation content in there. Did you find that working with that amount of visual effects actually constrained what you could do within the budget? So how did it work? Did you actually say, right, we need this CGI, so that's got to be done and the rest of the money has got to do this? Or did it work did you kind of shave bits off where you could work to save money?
Well, a lot of the CGI was, I'll tell you where it started. There was we started with what we could get. There were certain legal constraints. We had to pay minimum wage. So we knew that the shoot was going to cost us a certain amount just because of how much we had to pay people. The film and the developing, we got a great deal, but there's only so far you can knock them down. Stuff is stuff and has to be paid for. So there were the kind of immovable things. The post-production, because these two are commercials producers, they have a lot of leverage. Sting are very powerful, so you can go to Smoke and Mirrors, who did a lot of the post on it, and you basically say, you will do our next 3 commercials. Please do this one for free. And they more or less did. Smoke and Mirrors put in days and days and days for nothing.
So it kind of came into the deals part of it.
So that came into the deals part of it. Saul originally, Saul is a brilliant animator. And originally he had hoped to have help, and we did get a company called, the name deserts me for a minute, to support him on the animation and to sort of like the Emperor and just do all the kind of crunching. But in the end they pulled out because they got a massive Guinness ad, and of course they wanted to earn some money. So he ended up doing all that himself, which is why we were something like 4 months late with our delivery.
Yeah.
Because he sat there and pixel by pixel constructed every single frame of that Emperor, which took him about 4 months. And originally we'd hoped to have 2 or 3 people contributing to that.
Did he actually do it with, I wasn't sure, but did you use like camera tracking to do it, or was it all just still images and then the animation layered?
Pass, because animation's not my thing.
No.
I know that he built it, he rigged it, and then he animated it all within the computer.
Okay.
And I know it took a very, very long time. So in answer to your question, post-production sort of, for such a post-heavy film, post-production actually took a kind of back seat to the fixed costs, if you like, of the crew and the shoot. And there wasn't really enough money, and Kat had to pull in an awful lot of deals, which she did brilliantly.